Welcome to Does It Matter by Brainy Ballers, where we dissect the game with cutting-edge analytics to give you the upper hand. We analyze everything from hand sizes to average depth of targets to uncover hidden trends that no one else sees. Say goodbye to guesswork and hello to data-driven domination. Because here at Brainy Ballers, we don't just watch the game, we understand it. So get ready, it's podcast time.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving into a question that honestly feels pretty vital if you're trying to get an edge in fantasy football or even pro scouting. Does a college wide receiver's YRR metric actually predict how well they'll do in the NFL? Our mission today really is to give you a shortcut, to get you well informed on this specific metric so you can, decide how much weight to give it in your own scouting tool bag.
Yeah, what's really interesting here, I think, is how we got to the conclusions. We looked at data going back to 2018, specifically the top 50 fantasy finishers each year based on PPR scores. And we contrasted the real top performers with what we termed the bottom 10. So players ranked 41st to 50th.
Okay, so comparing the elite with the guys just hanging on in that top 50 range.
Exactly. Now, we have to be up front, the data set isn't massive. We had 42 entries making the top 10 list across those years, and 239 athletes total since 2018. So these are definitely early insights. We genuinely thought we were finding some clear patterns at first, but, well, the final picture on correlation, it turned out to be quite surprising, way more than we anticipated.
Right, and that really kind of flipped our initial expectations on their head, didn't it? So you started out just looking at the average YRR for different groups, like top 5 finishers, top 10, top 20, and so on. What did that first pass even tell you?
Honestly, almost nothing. That first averages chart was, well, basically a dead end. It showed no real trend, at all. For instance, the top 5 guys, they only had a higher average college YRR than the 31st to 50th group in about half the seasons.
50%. So a complete coin toss, essentially.
Pretty much, yeah. A total toss-up. That immediately made us think, okay, hold on. We kind of expected to see this clear ladder, better fantasy finish, higher college YRR average, but it was much more like a flat line, which, really forced us to rethink things.
So definitely not the magic bullet predictor some fantasy players might hope for then. When those averages showed next to nothing, what was the next step? How did you try to cut through that noise and maybe find some kind of signal?
Right. We had to dig a bit deeper. So we moved on to creating what we called a differences chart. We were looking for any kind of pattern, even a subtle one, by comparing YRR increments. We basically asked, where do the biggest jumps in performance happen when you compare the top fantasy guys to the bottom?
Okay, so looking for where the separation occurs.
Precisely. It involved subtracting the appearance frequency of the bottom 10 from the top 10 within specific YRR brackets. And this method initially pointed towards a potential optimal range.
Do you want to start dominating your drafts? At BrainyBallers.com, we've researched every metric under the sun for you to find which ones are best linked to fantasy points. You can access hundreds of metrics to sharpen your scouting ability so you know which metrics matter and which are just noise. Stop guessing on which thresholds to look for within each metric. Big numbers can be misleading or irrelevant. Our Ultimate Athlete Blueprints reveal essential scouting metrics, their importance, and benchmarks within each metric that help predict a player's probability of being a success or bust. Elevate your scouting ability with Brainy Ballers Ultimate Athlete Blueprints today. Click the link in the description. Now back to the show.
Somewhere around 1.8 to 2.4 YRR.
Okay, so you had this potentially promising range. Did you manage to refine that at all? Hone in on it?
We did, yeah. We tweaked it a bit, tested some nearby ranges, and we narrowed it down to a more precise window, 1.96 to 2.45 YRR. Now, this specific range did show up more often with the top guys, about 23.1% higher appearance rate in the top 10 compared to the bottom 10. So just based on who showed up where, it looked like we might have found an optimal zone.
Okay, so what does this really mean for you, the listener, and your scouting strategy? We went into this deep dive trying to see if college YRR was, a golden ticket. And we found this interesting range, 1.96 to 2.45. That seemed maybe optimal based on appearance rates. But there was another crucial step, right, to really put that finding to the test.
Absolutely crucial. That's where we brought in the Pearson correlation coefficient, which is just a standard statistical tool. It measures how strongly two things are linearly related, usually on a scale from -1 to +1. 0 means basically no connection.
Right, the standard correlation check.
Yeah.
So what did it show for college YRR versus NFL fantasy points?
Well, this was the real surprise. The Pearson value came out at 0.021.
0.021. Wow, that's That's incredibly close to 0.
Exactly. It indicates virtually no correlation, no meaningful linear relationship between a receiver's college YRR and their actual fantasy production in the NFL based on this data. And just for context, something like QB Draft Capital, which everyone agrees matters its Pearson value in a similar analysis, was negative 0.219.
Okay, negative 0.219. Still not super strong, but clearly way, way further from 0 than 0.021. A much stronger signal, even if inverse.
A much stronger signal, yes. Puts the YRR number in perspective.
That's a really stark contrast then. So you do all this work, you identify what looks like an optimal range based on appearance frequency, but the rigorous statistical test, the correlation, tells a completely different story.
That's precisely it. The main takeaway here really has to be that college YRR on its own should probably carry very little weight when you're evaluating these incoming NFL wide receivers. Yes, that 1.96 to 2.45 YRR range was identified as optimal within our studies method. But based on the lack of correlation, we explicitly do not recommend using YRR as a significant standalone metric for scouting players. It just doesn't hold up as a strong predictor of NFL success.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? How often do we, as analysts or fantasy players, get drawn to these metrics that seem sophisticated or insightful, only to find out that when you really put them under the statistical microscope, they don't quite hold up the way we thought? It's kind of a reminder that sometimes the simpler factors, or maybe just watching the player, might be more reliable. What really stands out to you about this whole process, and maybe what other metrics do you think deserve this kind of closer look next?